it's your girl Jaymie and your favorite astrologer. Today I want to talk about Pisces ingressing into, it's Venus ingressing into Pisces. And this is an exalted love placement, and I want to talk about the 5 different ways you can use this energy to really take advantage of it from passive streams of income. This can be, so the 5 ways I want to talk about how you can use this energy. This specific placement is going to be, we're going to be talking about how to work with money, self-worth, your relationship with food, your relationships in general, and your relationship with pleasures and indulgences. And this is because Venus in Pisces is an exalted placement, because Venus is about love and Pisces is unconditional. And the best form of love is unconditional. That's why this is a really beautiful, harmonious placement. And every astrological transit and placement, you're able to leverage and access certain energies more easily than others. Certain things, there's just more connectivity and it's more favorable. And so you really want to take advantage of the energy and where it's at right now, because it also makes the energy more beneficial when you progress into the next placements. And right now, this is a really beautiful time to connect with things, to really work on areas where you've had any traumas, any love traumas, anything where you're experiencing any toxic, painful, problematic areas in your life, whether it's the topics that we're going to discuss today or whatever is going on in your life. And I recommend you work on one area in your life where you are particularly really critical with yourself, an area where you need and deserve unconditional love, because that's the energy that's really potent right now. You want to take an approach that feels good, that's gentle, and really loving with yourself. Now, because this is a general reading, it's not going to apply to everyone in the same way, depending on your aspects. Connecting with this energy might be a little bit more difficult for you than for others, but it's still a theme that there's a lot of value focusing on. So this is something where, particularly because Pisces is on the healing axis with Virgo, and Virgo manifests healing through more material means, and Pisces is more energetic and esoteric. You want to really work on some of the more receptive energies that Pisces is working with, but it's also a great time to explore any areas where you might be more critical. You might be more Virgo in nature, where you're there's some beautiful energies with Virgo, but if you're being particularly critical, this Pisces placement is going to make it easier for you to be more loving, to let things go, to allow things to flow a little bit more harmoniously, because Pisces is not only a water sign, but it's which is passive in nature, but it's the most passive sign. It's a mutable sign. And so there's a lot of supportive, receptive, healing energy that you can access here. It's a great time to dissolve energy. Pisces is about dissolving boundaries. And so, it's not always beneficial to dissolve boundaries, but areas where maybe you've been really critical, really harsh with yourself, something that you need to let go of, whether it's emotional, psychological, physical, like for example, Venus rules clothes. Now is an excellent time to donate some of your clothes. Pisces is about charity organization, and the act of purging can be very healing as well, emotionally and psychologically. So there's different ways to really use and take advantage of this energy, but it's really a matter of just really taking advantage of and looking at what area of your life that you feel you can get the most value out of. Now, I mentioned passive streams of income. This can be an excellent time for you to explore what are some ways to receive passive streams of income. And this is especially useful for those of you who are exchanging time for money, because we only have a finite amount of time. So if you're making money based on the amount of time that you have available, then you're sort of limiting yourself to a degree. So this can be a time where you can be like, well, what are some ways that I can receive passive streams of income? What does that look like? Now, I do want to be clear that when you ask these questions, you might not get really detailed, specific responses. There are a lot of wonderful resources online where they tell you ways to learn about financial literacy, practice passive streams of income, and I highly encourage you to check it out. But when you're in this state right now trying to get that information. Pisces is the sign of confusion, ambivalence, so you might not get the exact details in a very like step-by-step sort of a way, and so if you have some ideas, some inkling, but it's not super detailed, that's okay, because that means you're in the energy of Pisces, and just trust that the information is going to unfold over time. It's really about trusting. And in fact, the best way to materialize Venusian things in this energy is to trust, to be less passive, unless you have something like Mars conjuncting Venus, where there's like an action-oriented influence in your chart. To kind of connect with sort of that passive spiritual elements of Pisces is going to be really valuable. So one of the things that you can practice is prayer or setting intentions. And I do have another recommendation if that doesn't necessarily vibe with you, and it does go hand in hand with prayer. But the reason why I recommend prayer is because for me, it's something that I honestly really didn't resonate with it initially, because I'm not a religious person. I thought it didn't belong to me, which is why setting intentions was more powerful for me. Because even taking the time to make a self-declaration and say, hey, these are the things that I want, these are the things that I'm interested in, you're giving that focus, you're vocalizing it. There's a lot of power in that. But specifically with prayer, and this is something I learned from the book Money Magic, which is the other thing that I was going to recommend. One of the assignments is that you pray every day for 30 days. And the reason why this book gave that recommendation is because it said that it's really difficult for people who don't feel worthy to pray. And it's true. Like, my first reaction when I was decided to embark on this journey, I was like, I don't want to just pray and receive things. I have to earn it. And that's actually a trauma response. Like, you know, it makes sense that we may want to participate and have a sense of altruism from a place that's healthy, and I'm very much that type of person. I like that energy exchange. But when there's resistance to asking for the things that you want because you don't feel worthy, you don't feel deserving, and you feel like you have to prove and earn that by, you know, doing something in exchange for it, that kind of tells a story that there's something to be worked on with your Venus. We live in this world that kind of like pits us against each other, and we have sort of this survival kind of a thing going on here. And so it's difficult for us to remember sometimes, but at the end of the day, like, we all deserve material support. We all deserve to feel safe, to have our basic needs met, to have a roof over your head if that's what you want, to make sure that we're properly nourished and healthy, warmed, clothed, you know, all of these things. And it's something that we don't always remember because of the kind of world that we live in and the distraction and stuff like that. So, and this is something that Venus reminds us of, because Venus rules Taurus, which is about maintaining your resources. It's home to the second house in your birth chart, and it literally sits below your first house, which is you as a person. So these are things that support you: food, material resources, your sense of self-worth. These are all things that are really important for us to work on. So there's something about when you start praying or setting intentions, for those of you guys who aren't religious. Like, for me, I was like, I'm not religious, like, prayer doesn't belong to me. But there is a power in declaring and vocalizing these things, because in addition to Taurus, which is about, you know, things that support us, which is, we all have Taurus in our chart somewhere. We all have a second house that sits below our first house. This means that we all deserve this support, whether we realize it or not. Venus also rules Libra, and Libra is about collaboration. It's an air sign, you know, and so these things are just here to remind us that, you know, expressing yourself, verbalizing what it is that you want, there's a lot of power in it. And we live in a world where society is designed to be divisive. But if you look throughout civilizations, when people were healthiest and most collaborative and supportive, and, you know, their nutrition and all of these things were in a better place, people were more supportive, they were more community oriented. And so in order to have a better relationship within ourselves, our relationship with money, and to connect with our sense of self-worth and do well with Venusian matters, it's important for us to receive support. And this is something that It's difficult for a lot of us, and it's difficult for everyone, but it's really interesting. I noticed this correlation because of the toxic patriarchal society we live in, where women are pit against each other. I've met women who have had a lot of trust issues receiving, and they're just like, no, I don't want to like borrow clothes from girls because you never know, they're going to get angry and all these different things. And that's interesting because Venus rules clothes, and so it manifests in these sorts of ways. And in order to be successful, in order to be accomplished, it's important for us to practice receiving. That guardedness, that barrier, that sense of hyper independence is indicative of a Venus that needs to be healed. And this is a great time to really focus on those areas of our lives. And this is where prayer is a great way, because Pisces rules prayers, angels, spirit, spirituality. And so pray, set the intention, take this time to practice receiving. Maybe look at areas where you feel like you can practice receiving safely. Maybe in isolation, because Pisces is the sign of isolation. Or maybe it's doing something that's enjoyable and pleasurable for you. That's Venus in a spiritual way. Whether that's listening to music, whether that's listening to solfeggio frequencies, vibrations that are designed to help you to heal. One thing is doing sound baths, for example, something that I really love. If you live in LA, I think it's Den Meditation in the Valley. One of my favorite healers, I think his Instagram handle is Jaymie the Healer. He does some amazing sound bath healings, and he facilitates Akashic record healings and stuff. This is a great thing to do. Meditation is something that's great. Personally, and I'm gonna go in a little bit of a brief rant about this. It really bothers me when people just indiscriminately say you should meditate or get grounded, because that tells me a person's ignorance and that you may not be trauma informed. Because if people are saturated in trauma, being in still meditation may not be the best thing, because then you become present with all of the shit that you're not ready to face, and that can wreak havoc on your nervous system. But meditation can show up in different ways. It can be listening to music, it can be running, exercising, stream of consciousness writing. So whatever that is, maybe you want to engage in what those things are, finding and connecting with healthy pleasures and turning it into a spiritual practice, or engaging in things that are particularly spiritual in nature. This could also be a good time to let go of problematic indulgences. And going back to money, I really do recommend the Money Magic book, which isn't about financial literacy. It's more about the energetics of money. So this is something that can kind of help you get into connecting with sort of the esoteric aspects of money, which is why it's a great time if you don't want to necessarily stay in the ambivalence and you like to be a little bit more cerebral like I am and have some sort of knowledge to immerse yourself in. This is a really great place. This is a great place to start. Other areas may be to work on your self-worth, food, work on aspects with your relationship. So when it comes to food, for example, this can be a good time to explore your relationship with food, whether you're overeating, undereating, and it doesn't even have to be that like you have like this really critical relationship with food. It could just be maybe an area that you want to improve upon and make it more enjoyable for yourself. I know someone who has Venus in her second house, Pisces, and Venus is about food. Pisces is a dissolving sign, and it's in her second house of food. So this shows that food supports her, but it's something that she forgets to do. And so I always tell her, I'm your Pisces. I'm the one that reminds you to eat. I support you and stuff like that. So maybe if you are negligent with food, my bestie is like this, becoming intentional with what you're eating and starting with small little things, having snacks here and there, shifting your relationship with that. Pisces rules liquids, so maybe this is about getting into the practice of making soups or drinking water more. Like, so many people are dehydrated, which I don't understand. I have lots of energy, I don't need coffee, I'm up all the time, but I completely malfunction without any water. So I don't know how people are able to function. But this can be an area where you just sort of rebalance that. If you find yourself overeating, or you're really critical with yourself, or you have like a hostile relationship with food, this can be a good time to explore your self-worth and the dialogue that you have with yourself, exploring where those thoughts came from and stuff, and exploring ways that you can be kinder with yourself. And in this sense, I do and I don't, depending on the circumstance and who you are. I want to bring up affirmations. As someone who has really strong Scorpio placements, I'm not a fan of affirmations. And even before it was proven that it doesn't necessarily work depending on how you use it, like neurologically speaking, it creates mixed signals. But it does depend on how you choose to connect with affirmations. But like if you're feeling really shitty about yourself and you're like, I feel good, I feel good, I feel good, and you're contradicting, it's a way to gaslight how you're feeling, and that just creates mixed signals inside of you, and that kind of conflict is unnecessary, avoidable, and it just creates unnecessary confusion. So I'm not a fan of it. But with that said, I've noticed that people with strong Libras in their chart tend to do well with, or can do well with, affirmations, because affirmations by design, they're verbal and repetitive, but it's also very like it uses like happy, positive messaging and stuff, and so that can work with some Libras. But if that's not something that works for you, I don't recommend that you contradict and ignore how you feel. Recognize how you feel. Explore what's your self-worth. What are the things that you're saying? What are some things that you're saying to yourself that you don't like? What are some things that you want to change your perspective and thoughts on? And look at like how can you be kinder with yourself when it comes to those things. You know, if you think that there are things that you hate about yourself, you can choose to explore maybe like, well, what do I love about myself? But if that's not comfortable for you, maybe focusing on what are some things that you love and just exposing yourself to things that you love, you know, and allow that love energy to kind of cascade and percolate in you and stuff, and just sort of like use some of those more subtle things. Now, if you want to work on exploring your sense of self-worth and how you can improve that, and you want to like get more insight specifically on childhood traumas, I really like Hey Dr. Rachel. She has a lot of content with some thought-provoking questions. She takes a much more emotional, soft approach to exploring these areas, which I think is really good, particularly if you're prone to a lot of trauma, because it's more digestible. It's not as like direct in your face, and so that can make it give you a more sense of safety for you. Or if you're more prone to sort of like the emotionally toned dialogue, this can be something that's really good for you. When it comes to, if you want to look at your relationships, this can be an area where you can look at two things. You can look at like, what area are you maybe more guarded around and you have some resistance around? What are some barriers? And if you have any anger or resentment, what are some things that you can let go of? This can be an area that by exploring this right now, you may be more receptive to releasing some of those energies. Now, on the other hand, if you're prone to dissolve your boundaries and you need to actually practice boundaries, this is going to be a good time to kind of look at, okay, where are some areas where I can heal? Because again, Venus being ruled by Taurus, ruling your second house, it's about things that support you in your physical body. Boundaries may be exactly what you need, and that's going to be something that supports you, especially if you have strong Pisces in your chart. But of course, this isn't limited to specific signs. If you're paying attention to what I'm saying and you're noticing that these are things that apply to you, this is a good time to be like, okay, this is an area where I can practice and maintain boundaries. Particularly if you want to engage in the Taurus energy and you practice boundaries just a little bit every day consistently, because that's the energy of Taurus. If that's too much for you, it can be trauma triggering or too overwhelming to do, or you're just not interested in maintaining something on a daily basis. This can be like you can use the Libra energy and practice with another person, someone who is supportive, someone who, when they communicate with you, you feel good about it. Or this can be something that you practice on your own, because Venus is in Pisces. It's about retreating, and you can kind of explore how you want to communicate these things, or what are some things that you've struggled to express in the past, because Pisces is represented by a fish that can't speak, right? So this can be an area where you look at, what does that look like, and why has this not supported you? How would you like to heal from this? What are some ways that'll be supportive? And kind of focus on that, and just exploring what'll feel good for you, what doesn't feel good for you. You don't necessarily have to take action right now. You can if you want to, but that might be something that you choose to do later on when Venus ingresses into Aries, where the energy is more assertive and you take action. And so right now it may be the time just to kind of collect the data. And if you want to explore more of this more deeply, I highly recommend I Am Taylor Chandler. She is a therapist that focuses on attachment style, and I recommend her because therapy is it's a conflicting energy for a lot of people, particularly because therapy by design is Eurocentric. And so the effectiveness and the benefit and the value of therapy is directly proportional with your proximity to whiteness. Whereas Taylor is a Black therapist, so she makes it more accessible for people of color. And I've attended, I believe it was her mother wound workshop or an attachment style workshop around painful mothers, and it was a workshop for everyone, but she also has workshops specifically for Black mothers. And so she does an excellent job, and she's different from Rachel Dr. Rachel in that Taylor, she's very much, she explains things in a way that's more direct, but very like irrefutably logical. Like you cannot unlearn when she tells you something, you're just like, holy shit, that's true. It's very direct and stuff, and it can be really clarifying. So I highly recommend even just watching her videos, because the way that she expresses things, it'll really fundamentally, quickly, and efficiently change your mindset. There's something about it that's so absolutely powerful. So those are just a few ways that you can work with the Venus in Pisces energy, working on your self-worth, money, food, relationship, pleasures. But if you want to use a different method instead, keep in mind that the planets have 4 different ways it can manifest. It's emotional, psychological, physical, spiritual. You can pick any area of your life that you want to heal from and take it from there and see which approach feels good for you. And this is the best way to take advantage of this astrological placement. I hope that you found this video helpful. Thanks so much for watching.